Hi guys, welcome to my session. So we are almost good to go. We will probably wait for another 60 seconds until everybody has settled. There are still people coming in, and we will talk about Teams governance and Teams management today. So yeah, let's just give them a couple more seconds and then we can jump right into it. Okay, all right. Let me share my screen. And I would ask you to comment if you can see everything, if the sharing works, and then we're good to go. All right. Yes, perfect. So my name is Florian Pflanz. I'm your host as well as the presenter of and speaker of this session right now. So we will do Teams management like a boss. We will do Teams governance. So I did around 200 workshops about governance and management last year. So I will share a little bit about the do's when it comes to governance, more than I would share about the don'ts. With Teams, there is a lot of potential for new M365 groups, a lot of potential for new people engaging in stuff they would have never done in SharePoint. And this is why Teams is so full of potential, but still it is hard to manage because in a lot of companies, in a lot of environments, there is no structure. This might seem easy in the beginning, and during COVID, it wasn't that bad because everybody needed to start with their stuff. But in the end, we in the internal IT or in consultancies, we do need to give some rules, some structure to teams, because if we don't, it looks like an abandoned WhatsApp application. After a couple of months, there are way too much stuff that is not managed. So what we will take a look at is how most people started and treating their tenants and what you can do about it. Just get started was definitely a sentence we heard a lot in the last couple of years when it came to Teams, because it's nice, it somehow replaced Skype for Business, and people started to create thousands of different teams, even in tenants where you have just a couple of hundred people. People started to create test teams and never deleted them. They used unclear names. I've seen so many things in the last couple of years, stuff like test team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you open a tenant and it has like 50, 60, 70 test teams. And that's one of the main challenges we in IT have to get that somehow sorted out, because we will be the ones responsible for the mess, and even for the duplication of information. As most of you know, there is an underlying data storage background, so-called SharePoint, and behind every M365 group, which means behind every team, there is a SharePoint site. And as a team owner, as a site collection admin, he can do all things he wants at a SharePoint site. So saves data, save it somewhere else, and therefore it's in a lot of environments it's a big mess. So this results in no overview, and not only no overview for the IT department, but also no overview for the user. Because if you have 100 teams you are part of, you have no chance to see what's going on in every one of them. In our experience, most companies have quite a couple of teams that could have been one team, or at least after a certain amount of time should have been archived because the collaboration shifted to another environment. Stuff like this happens all the time. So there is not a good option for overview if you don't have quite a good Teams management. And a lot of things are lost because people tend to chat in Teams. If you chat with somebody and you send in documents, it's everything in OneDrive with yourself. Your team members won't see this ever. It's always in your own environment. So there needs to be something that gives a hint or a rule to save data in the team itself, in the data tab, and not in a chat. So this is also part of a Teams management we will tackle in this session. The result of all of this, the result is usually that the acceptance drops. We have seen this in SharePoint, we have seen it in Lotus Notes, and in old environments, people are not staying in environments where they are not satisfied, especially the users. So we really don't want them to go to a different app, because Microsoft is the one that is the application our company has chosen, and it shouldn't be the way to communicate then over Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever again. So this is something we should definitely tackle. From the IT point of view, an unstructured environment leads to increasing IT costs. And I've just come out of a project a couple of weeks ago where consultants of our company tackled a tenant where there was pure chaos, and it costs a lot of days to get this fixed, especially when you didn't talk about security and structure before you roll out Teams globally. But to be fair, there are strategies to get these already existing teams back on track. So it also leads to false information, because there are double, triple, quadruple PowerPoint presentations. The actual PowerPoint presentation you need is in a certain team, while you're working on one that's pretty old and has been stored maybe in the right place, but somebody else moved it, copied it, changed it. And other than having user adoption here and the loss of user acceptance, you have to think about the storage. So yeah, in the beginning, that doesn't matter, because you anyway have enough, and if you need more, you buy more. But if that takes on year for year, it probably gets pretty expensive if you don't have the right information in the right place and no duplicates. And so anyway, it's a waste of working time. So instead of having time for adoption and checking out the new features in IT for Teams, it will probably only be cleaning up. And this is something a modern IT admin shouldn't do all day long. It's still part of its job, but there are other things you can do. For example, building a Power application. All right, so where's the potential? So where can you save time? The problem is, in Teams, there won't be a migration. Maybe to a new environment of Teams somehow, someday, but it won't be the way you've been used to, or I at least have been used to, when you have a SharePoint environment to 13, and then you go, all right, now we change to 16, and then we change to 19, and every time we migrate to a new environment, we make it better, we make it like more elaborate. That's not working with Teams, because it's planned to run for a lot of years, and probably it won't change the way we would wish for, that it would be a complete new environment and we could start from scratch. It will probably be that we have, for a pretty long time, old teams we need to take care of. So this is something we need then, the Teams management and the governance. And then we can go further. We can say, okay, to make it easier to create new teams, we can work with templates, because working with templates in Teams means I deliver a certain structure and I ask people to work with this certain structure. So first of all, with Teams out of the box, you can at least roll out a team with already existing certain channels. There are different opportunities or different features of Teams and Microsoft to do it out of the box, and there are third-party products to have templates. So you can do PnP templates, you can create templates or teams over a Graph API. If you've heard about that, that's working with PowerShell, and therefore you could still roll out a team with an already existing pre-populated structure. So this is something you can take a look at, and we will in this session today. So the last part, governance, templating, is probably the structure. It's very, very satisfying to have an overview, to have to know what is a team good for, what its purpose, what is its owner. Does it have two owners? Because that's really necessary if somebody goes to vacation, leaves the company, or is sick. You need still people that are responsible for your environment. So structure is indispensable. So let's jump to my next slide. How to do it? How to keep control over your teams. So we've just seen the challenges, and they're pretty big actually, because Teams is really open in most companies, or at least in a lot of companies. Everybody can create new teams. So therefore, I've created a poll just for checking out how my audience now is settled when it comes to governance. I will publish it now. I would ask you to answer the questions so I can show this on stage later. Yeah, okay. So I would ask you to vote. Go to the poll section in your on your chat window. Yeah, perfect. First votes are in. Do you have governance in place? Not. With best practices, I mean basically telling people what to do, not to have it technically in place. But the first votes are already in, and there it is not in place. All right. Okay. Third-party tool would be something like Teams Manager, like there are many of them, and MS out of the box are features Microsoft already has. I will talk about them in a couple of seconds. So, okay, we do have quite a couple of people in here, but just 4 voted. Maybe the others are still drinking their morning coffee or even their evening tea. Doesn't matter. All right, there are more. Okay, perfect. Let's close the poll. That's a good overview of what is in place with you guys. Let me just close that. So let's start with keep control over your teams. What are the specific things you can do and you can tackle? I need to switch the monitor. All right, so we do have 4 steps. Restrict creation. Do not allow every user to create groups or planners. What? Yes. For at least for the beginning of a good governance strategy, there is short time in the end to let everybody do that. There are different strategies, but in the beginning, if I start with my governance strategy, I need to have a certain amount of time where nobody creates new teams, that I can set up everything and can teach people or can buy a governance tool or something else, but I need to restrict the creation of teams. How is that done? There is a PowerShell script for that. I can post, if that's interesting, just write in the comments here, yeah, please send me that PowerShell script. It's executed like in 2 or 3 minutes. And then there is a security group you can set up in Azure that still can create teams. Nobody else can. So you can decide if management is in that group or is it just IT. Let me just check in the questions. Yes, we will come to the, let me just show it on the stage. Can you give an example of the different templates you allow your team's users to choose from? Yes, we will go to the best used, or at least best practices templates most companies have in place later. So after you have restricted the creation and said, okay, nobody can create a group, by the way, with Microsoft 365, if you restrict the creation of teams, you automatically restrict the creation of M365 groups. So doesn't matter if you just have a centralized team environment, it matters if you don't. So if you have parts of your company that just work with SharePoint and that very intensively, then you would probably need to speak to those people, because shutting down the group creation for regular users means they need to ask a certain person. Yes, it is influencing the site collection creation. Therefore, there are two different strategies. One is having the IT security group that is able to create new groups. The other one is having champion users you add to those groups, to these security groups, to say, okay, there are certain people who are allowed to create new groups. The third strategy, but that's not an out-of-the-box strategy, would mean using a third-party tool or creating a Power App to ask for something. I can show you an example later on that can be very easy. So these are 2 to 3 strategies you can go for, but for the start, shut it down and then see what happens. It's very interesting how many people or how few people come and ask for new groups. And then create a structure. Use templates, use Microsoft templates. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have already seen the Microsoft templates, but there is also the opportunity to define how a user should create a team. Let's say you have an approval. Let's say somebody needs to ask for a new team, and you say, okay, we want to do it completely out of the box. Then you create with Microsoft 3 to 4 templates. Most templates that have been used, that I have seen, are departments, topics, projects, and sandbox. I'll show later how they can look like. Why? Why sandbox? Because you need the first 3 of them to have a working system where people can really choose from and say, okay, this is a department team, this is a new project, and I need planner and one of them is new project. However, the sandbox team is almost the most important, because this is the team people are allowed to use for checking things out. So third-party tools sometimes have the opportunity to have specific life cycles. If you don't use a third-party tool, you can also use a specific naming convention for people using the test template. For example, if you use it, name it test or name it sandbox XYZ. And then you as an admin can go over once a month and say, okay, I delete all of the sandbox teams. They're based on the sandbox template. This gives you the opportunity, even if you work with a very small governance strategy, to get rid of everything you don't need in your tenant, especially when it's there to test new features. And that brings us to the naming conventions. Naming conventions are more important than you might think. Naming conventions are not only good for the teams that you as administrator have a better overview of what has been created, it is also good for people getting an overview of what they're actually part of. Especially when you're using it on the smartphone or you use Teams on a small laptop, you just have very little space for a team name, and this very little space shouldn't be populated with like an SAP number or something. It should definitely tell you and the end user what it is about. So an example we will see in a second is something like, if it's a project, would be the easiest way to say, okay, P underline. So it's definitely a project. or it's a department. There are different ways of doing it. One of the most common naming conventions would be DEPT, and then underline and the name of the team. So this could be at least a starting point to see as an administrator and an end user, what is this? By the way, teams can be renamed. So you have to be careful because of the SharePoint side in the background, but you could also rename existing teams to get a better structure in the tenant. And the last thing is the life cycle. Microsoft has one naming convention for M365 groups and one life cycle for all of them. It's not the best solution, but it's definitely a minimum solution. You can set up, maybe not a naming convention because it doesn't matter if everything is named completely the same, there is no difference, but you can set up a life cycle if you decide on, hey, I want to start with cleaning up the tenant. This one is called retention policy for M365 groups. If you Google that, can even lead you to a blog post. You can find where to set up this. We can maybe look in the admin center later if we have enough time, and there you can set up a life cycle for all of them. Let's say you choose a starting point and you say, now I want to clean up my tenant. So you set up one life cycle for every M365 group, and the owners of these groups get an email from Microsoft, hey, do you still need this? We want to archive it. And then they can react. If they do not react, it gets archived. And this is a way of automatically cleaning your system, at least at first. It's called retention policy. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. All right, so, okay, there is one question concerning what I've said before. From the Dynamics 365 system, I'm used to development quality assurance environments and to deploy parts from there to production. Is that also possible for teams? You would think so, but no. You can have demo tenants varies from your regular or higher license with Microsoft. It's called CDX demo environments. You can create them for free, but you can't move something. What you can do is using a third-party application like Teams Manager or something, you can check all of these things in your test environment and then move them to deploy to prod. But this is something only third-party applications do, I'm afraid. Everything else is always working on an open heart with Teams. It's what Microsoft decided is best. I know especially for bigger companies, it's a pain. But yeah, that's the way it is. So no development environment that is just moved to the live environment when it comes to Teams, especially about naming conventions and so on. So, all right. Next slide. Restrict creation. So deactivate it, restrict the user group to admins. That's the so-called security group. And set up a request process to teams and groups. We will now quickly go to the blog post I promised you. If you want to know more about this stuff, about the governance thing in general, you can go to Solutions to Share to the blog. There are a lot of articles about this, even when it comes to guest users. Everything we can't tackle right now is in here. And let me just check where the blog post is. I hope to find it, otherwise I will leave you to it and post this in post this side in the comments. So let's briefly go over it. All right, so let's take this one. All right, so here you can find the blog post regarding shutting down the process. of creating teams for everybody. The request process can be a ticketing system, it can be an email, it can be a third-party tool, anything else. It could be in general via traditional mail, but it gives you time to set up the process and to set up an adoption process. This means starting with the process, creating a structure, predefined templates. How could a template look like? I already said projects, departments, construction teams, and so on. Is it for private? Is it for public? Is it internal? So a lot of companies do that with out of the box and do an adoption with their users, do a manual with their users. It's also possible with third-party tools, but you don't need them. And then add metadata. So you would ask, how would I add metadata to a team? Yes, that's a thing. You can't add metadata to a regular team. There are different ways of doing this. So if you create a new request process and you anyway need to create these teams manually, you could also populate a SharePoint list. Or if you build a Power application that creates them for you, you could add a SharePoint list to the Power application to create an entry in the SharePoint list for a new team. Or you use a third-party application that does it by yourself. By the way, I know probably you have already checked my background. We, the makers of the Team Summit, are from Solutions to Share, and we do these kind of applications, but keep aware it works also without them. So go through it, predefine templates, use classifications. What is a classification? Sensitivity label or Azure classification? How does that look like? Give me a second, I'll show you. Let's go to the Teams tenant. Let's open a team. Do you see this up here? That's a classification or a sensitivity label. Why is this important? That's a complete part of consultancy and Microsoft technique, but I will summarize it shortly. It's about what happens with such a team, what is allowed in such a team. In most licenses, sensitivity labels are part when you have that E3, E5, however, and then you can decide when creating a new team, should it get a sensitivity label? Is external sharing allowed? Take your time, go over these things, or book yourself a workshop that gets you inside of sensitivity labels. They are ridiculously important, but if they're set up once, it's very easy because you don't need to take care of them anymore. You just need to set them up once and then say, okay, if somebody creates a new team, however I add it manually or it's automatically added, there is a specific sensitivity label that allows for certain scenarios to share, not to share, invite guests, not to invite guests, and so on. So tackle this topic, it's really important. Going back to my slides. And the next one. So what also is important, and I already talked about this, is lifecycle management. So a team somehow needs to have an expiry date. I've seen companies who have that at least once a month. They shoot out emails if they don't work with an automated process to say, hey guys, today's the day of the month, please check out your teams and archive a team that is not used anymore. And there's one feature most of our users haven't seen, even if they have been for years. I'm sorry, question. Even if they have been in Teams for years, Robert, I will come to your question. I will quickly show what I was talking about here. Let me just, that's the wrong window. So, and you can show your users how to do this. It's so easy. Just click on that little steering wheel. Have you been there already? A lot of people haven't. And there is the thing that's called archived. these are all my archive teams. I do have over 230 archive teams. In my case, it's done automatically, but people can do it manually. So if I scroll up, I see my active teams here, and I can say, okay, I want to archive this team. And then it's archived. People can't write in there anymore. It won't change its place, but it can't be edited. And once it is archived, and it has been archived for quite a while, and you find these archive teams in your admin center, you can delete them, move them, and it's way easier for you to decide to clean out if somebody is archived for quite a while, some teams archived for quite a while. Where to find those? Let me just quickly jump to them. Go to your team's environment. Here it is. And then go to manage teams. And then you see this on the status. These teams are archived. If you use a M365 out-of-the-box retention policy, you would also see here the expiration date. And if you use the classification, like I've shown you earlier, you would see the classification of those teams. Be aware there are different kinds of classifications. The ones you should use are sensitivity labels. They can, by the way, also apply to M365 groups in general. They can be built for Outlook purposes. So check the topic out. It's very, very interesting. If you have questions for regarding sensitivity labels later, just come to me. I'm already pretty deep into it. So you have an overview of these teams, and once they have been archived, you can decide, like, once a year I want to get rid of them. And here we can also see, I don't know if that's if the font is big enough for you, but you can see I used naming conventions in here. I used P underline for new projects. I used Abteilung, that's German by the way, for a department. And so I see what these things are actually good for. So, and this would be the minimum of a naming convention, but it would still give me a hint what people wanting to, what was the purpose of this actually. So going back to the slides, I'm sorry, lifecycle management. I wasn't done yet. Where is it? There it is. So just to interrupt for a couple of seconds, to integrate policies into the template. Can you do that? Yes, with a third-party tool, you can integrate policies into a template. You could even say, if somebody picks the template, and if somebody picks the template and says that he wants to work with externals, he gets a different sensitivity label than he would have gotten if he said he wanted to work with internals. These kind of processes can be built. To be honest, this is a little bit more complicated, doing it over Graph API and with PowerShell. It's easier than to, if you have such requirements, to use a tool that does it automatically. But it's definitely possible, no question. All right. Lifecycle management means expiry date. How long does a team live? Use archiving. Tell your users that this feature does exist. Have a team request. We already talked about the shutting down the team's creation. The team request would means you do have a start point where the process and the life cycle actually starts. And then there's the deletion feature. I'm from Germany. People from Germany don't like to delete things. I know that in the US it's not very different because they think, all right, I could need it like in 10 years, but there are some regulations, especially when it comes to personal data, that things need to be deleted. So you should at least take a look in company policy and then decide when to delete. And by the way, Teams is on Azure. The more data you have, the more expensive it can be. So deletion should be definitely at least optional. All right. I'm still getting used to 2 screens. Okay. Next thing, naming conventions, prefixes and suffixes, metadata as prefix and suffix, OneNote, Planner, and so on. All of these things are important. Why? Because people tend to forget they tend to delete, they tend to somehow name everything the same. So I have seen environments where OneNotes always were named notes or project notes or department notes. And that results always in the problem that you have a lot of them and they are named the same. And I show you a scenario that usually happens in a lot of companies. And it looks like this. So somebody goes through their teams and say, oh, nice, I have a team and I want to open the OneNote, and oops, I clicked and it's gone. And then you probably get a ticket in IT. Because somebody just deleted the tab and not the OneNote. And now they would say, hey, IT admin, I've lost my OneNote. And then you would say, okay, how's it called? It was called Notes. And that's a problem. Because probably like hundreds of OneNotes with end users are called Notes. So you should at least have a strategy where people need to name their OneNote, and that's the most common thing I've seen after the team it is in. So I do have a team that's called P_IT, so project in IT Siri. That would be a very, very common naming convention for projects. And therefore my OneNote that was in here is also named P_IT_Siri project notes. Doesn't need to be that elaborate, but at least somehow it needs to be linked. Same is, by the way, with Planner. Planner is even creepier because this view just gives me the chills. It should at least have naming conventions in there, because otherwise it will blow your mind. And then you can just go back to the team, or you can say your user, hey, no problem at all, just add a OneNote and add the Siri OneNote to it. So search for it in here, so by name, down here is it, and then save it, and then the top is back again, is there. So that's one of the common accidents, and that's why naming conventions are this important. With Office 365 tasks, you probably all know this already. For me, it's still something that somehow confuses me, but I mean Planner. All right. Governance features in general, and in this case also in Teams Manager. I don't know if you've seen that in the break. So you have customized templates you should work on. So what are the topics people are asking for? We already talked about this. It's, in most cases, it's departments, it's topics, it's projects, requests and approval. Use a request process in the beginning. Afterwards, if everything works fine and everybody can actually create teams after your regulations, no problem, go for it. But in the beginning, you should use approvals to check what people are actually looking for. That gives you more intel. And then always update, see what people are creating and react to it. That's the suggestion when it comes to new teams. And the last couple of minutes gives us the opportunity to check out another governance and teams management part, and that's the app part. I go out of my slides now, and we will move to my admin environment. You probably already know this. You can use the app section here. I've heard this in 2 or 3 speeches today regarding Teams and applications. There are 1,432 applications in the Teams App Store. And a lot of them shouldn't be downloaded. Why? Because Microsoft is checking the application itself and if it works, but it doesn't. They don't check the background of the application, the collection of data, the personal data that is stored, and so on. So you should definitely think about which applications you want to use. Therefore, we suggest having the global org-wide default is the default group. That means everybody in my company. And you can create a second group you call IT people, where everything is allowed. That's at least in most companies the case. So IT is allowed to check out everything. But these global org-wide people shouldn't have this set up. Definitely not, because this way they are allowed to upload applications, to use third-party applications from the store, and to use every Microsoft application there is. You would probably ask, why shouldn't they use every Microsoft application there is? Because there are Microsoft applications that cost you money, and they cost Azure resources. So the ones you should definitely take a look at, and you definitely should check out if everybody needs them really, is creating Power Apps. Probably not a good idea. Using Power BI. If you have it in place in your company and everybody has a license that is big enough or includes it, fine. If not, shut it down, because otherwise people will create stuff that costs money or at least causes you problems in IT. How do you do that? Microsoft applications is usually block specific apps, allow all others, and then you would say, okay, I want to block, how is it called? Power BI, and add it to my list and block it. So, and third-party applications would be allow specific apps, block all others. From the apps you already know, for example, Teams Manager or something, you can allow them, but everything else needs to be checked, because it's not automatically a safe app because it's with Microsoft. It's just an app that works. So check out the applications. There are a lot of apps that people really need to use and they like to use, like Polly, or there's a nice meeting agenda decision from the US. It's called Decisions. Could also be checked out. Or, as I said, Teams Manager, External User Manager, things that help people actually in Teams. And everything else should be blocked. Would then look like this. I would search for Teams Manager in here, for example. I would edit, allow it, and then people would be able to use it properly. Custom apps, almost never. There are just a few scenarios where you would go with custom applications. Custom applications for end users. If you uploaded a custom application and decided to build one, to buy one or something, yes, allow it, but everything else, not. This is a very, very big security lag, and it should definitely be shut down. So would also be allow specific apps, block all others. And if you have a nice application that wants, there are like emoji applications or something, or GitHub templates you can download. If you want to check out one application that is very nice, a GitHub application that's called Company Communicator, that would be something I would put in there, but nothing else. And then let's just cancel that for my environment, and for the IT people, do it differently. Or you have a certain department in your company that uses very specific applications. For them, you could also create a group in here. That is no problem at all. So that's a very important part of the governance, because that's one of the first parts. Your data gets lost to people in, yeah, I know that there are apps from China, Russia, from Germany, and so on, and you would probably consider before you let your users in these applications and let them use these applications. So yeah, let's just check if we're done. Yeah, we're done. That's a short overview of managing teams. So keep in mind, a good governance strategy means to control the creation. Even if you decide everybody is allowed to, there needs to be a regulation, naming conventions, templating, and a life cycle. That's the minimum. An environment that is cleaned, or at least works with these things can look like this. So let me just go to my tenant. So I do have just 4 teams in here. They are project teams. They are structured. They have a naming convention. They are from IT. I have a bigger team, like an organizational team. And all of them have a structure that follows a template. My template, by the way, that underlines this is here. So I created it with Teams Manager. You can also create it with Microsoft out of the box if you have less elaborate requirements. And then you can have channels that automatically are rolled out. And for a good governance strategy, there should be at least an idea for people how to save data that you don't have the mess later. I mean, things like a folder structure or something, so you can start as a user, not from scratch, but from a certain set of adjustments that already have been made for you. One last thing, and an important thing, a team owner is always a site collection admin. That is important to know. Also for the owner, you could also not tell him. But the thing is, and you need to definitely on some point in time to tackle what happens if somebody clicks open in SharePoint. There are solutions who block these kind of views so that people can just access the document library. But keep in mind, people that own a team also own the SharePoint site, therefore can build basically everything they like. And they should be at least aware that they are not allowed to do this. You could still keep silent and check out if people are gambling around, but it's hard to keep track because there is no management feature for this. So you don't know what people are actually doing in their own sites. You would, as an administrator, would need to go to these sites to actually see what is happening there. You can't go to an overview and see, Florian just messed around on his SharePoint site. Doesn't work. So this is something you should keep in mind. That's it. I know I went a little over time, but we have still a 50 minutes buffer. There's another questions. Are there suggestions for management around document sharing to avoid multiple versions appearing across different teams? Yes. There is more than one option to share, as your question already implies. And people tend to share in chats. So our suggestion from an adoption level is tell people to post in threads. So in a team thread. I think that's how it's called in English. I hope that's correct. So in a channel, they're supposed to post stuff in a channel, not in a chat. That benefits 2 things. One is the information gets shared with everybody. Second, the information ends up in SharePoint if somebody gets shared. So this is definitely something on the level of adoption and change management for users. You should tell them that they need to share them in SharePoint, and if they open something in SharePoint, let me open this in my environment here. It will always be the same document. If they say, okay, in the generals channel, we do have a folder where the marketing material is. If they have something in there, they are supposed to work on this document always, and they're not allowed to pull them out. You can really shut it down. So the download option can be shut down. I don't know if I would do it, but it may be, it would prevent people from downloading it, changing it, and then uploading in another version again. But adoption and information from our point of view is better to tell people that this should happen in a channel. There are features who can support this. For example, I think I've deployed it here. It's so-called the file manager. It's basically an explorer. that gives users an overview of everything that is in here, because the problem of navigating through a team is always that people switch from channel to channel and then they search stuff and they don't have an overview of, is this in this team or not? The regular way would go to, okay, I go to channels, then I open the files tab, then I check, is it in here? No, then I go to meeting, then I go to the files tab, and again, and it loads and it loads and it loads and it loads. Another way would be using something like a file explorer, where you can download it from the store, where you can say, okay, I want to open this and I want to check, is it the right document? I want to work with the preview, and so on. That could be an idea to have better adoption, especially when you have a lot of users that are used to work with explorers, and can somehow support staying in the right place with the document. I hope this answers the question. All right. So yeah, we went a little bit over time, but I think we still have a couple of minutes for questions if there's something unanswered. I would like to publish my last poll, which would be yeah, probably unnecessary. I wanted to know if some of you guys use already naming conventions lifecycle or additional metadata, but the feedback from the last poll said, okay, there is just a few solutions or strategies in place right now. So start with I'm sorry, it's a little bit late over here. Start with the regulation of the creation of new teams. That's definitely something I can suggest. If you want to have more information about the whole governance part, I already posted in the chat messages the, I don't know if that's, oh, is it gone? No, I'll post it again. The blog where you will find information regarding governance in general, so even out of the box. Another topic we couldn't, it's in the Q&A. I posted it in the Q&A, perfect. I would probably need to publish it. Yeah, here it is. So another topic we didn't tackle, you should definitely take a look at, is guests, how to treat guests. It shouldn't be allowed that everybody can invite guests because it gives you a total mess. So you can also do that over sensitivity labels. That's a great way of doing it out of the box. You can also do it with third-party tools. Yeah, and I think that's it for today. If you are in general interested in our knowledge, in our applications, in governance, it's really not a big thing. It might seem huge. Something like the Teams Manager can handle this in a day, and then your environment is clean. But that's just a suggestion of a person who sells this product. So there are also other opportunities. Yeah. Have a good day. Have a good event. I'm looking forward to see you in Expert Circle. Take the time. Go to the sponsors. We are looking forward to meeting you. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.